This video is sponsored by Squarespace. So last week Ferrari were testing some new FIA innovation at Fiorano, specifically wheel covers to try and reduce the amount of spray these cars kick out in the wet. This seems to be a particular problem with these ground effect cars, but not unique to them either. We all remember Spa 21, right? Well, the common sentiment hasn't been great. For the whole world to see, they look ugly. But at the end of the day, maybe this is the way it has to be. Ugly wheel covers or no racing at all. Is there a perfect solution with no compromises? Well, my name's Tommo. Let's talk about it. You know the first thing I thought when I saw these pictures? What are those?
They are my
Prototipo di copriruota progettato dalla FIA per la pioggia.
Classic Hall of Fame meme, that one. Love it. Look, a part of me thinks these images should never really have seen the light of day. Cheers, Federico, for that. Well done. You would think there's a way of testing these prototypes behind closed doors. They're clearly still in early development, but instead Twitter has had a look and had a little cry about it. Then again, Fiorano is a private test circuit, and realistically, there's always going to be leaks with stuff like this, isn't it? The FIA could try as much as they can, but the people are going to see. And actually, you know what? Part of me doesn't mind the fact that they're seemingly quite open with, oh, this is like an early prototype, we'll see how it goes. Maybe that's even better, you know, there's a bit more, I guess, transparency and communication that they're at least trying to solve this issue. And look, the prevailing common sentiment is that they're ugly, and do I agree? Do they look nice? No, they don't. Of course, they are hideous. They look like the little wheels you get on your office chair. You know what I mean? Especially the fully covered out ones. There's two versions, which we'll talk a bit more about in a bit. They're not great, are they? And honestly, yes, I know this is an early prototype, but do I see them getting any prettier? I don't. If you're going to try and design a solution that reduces the spray from a tyre in an open wheel racing car, beyond this, I don't know what else they can do. Fundamentally, I don't think it can be really anything but this, unless you fundamentally change, again, the course of this sport being an open wheel racing series and cover them up. And here lies my problem with much of the criticism, I would say, because, you know, I've seen people say, oh, this is just a stick and plaster solution, and that the regulation should be changed so that we don't need a stick and plaster solution, and fundamentally these cars should be able to operate in the rain without generating crazy spray. But is that realistic? I don't think so. If F1 wants to preserve its identity as an open wheel racing series, I don't think there is a perfect solution. I don't think that exists. I think every solution has compromises there. Otherwise, it would have been discovered a long time ago, you know? Would permanently enclosing the wheels reduce the amount of spray produced? Yes, absolutely. That way, any water displaced by the wet weather tyre can't just shoot up in the air. It has to disperse the sides and out of the back into the wheel arches. And for context, the F1 wet tyre, which again, we don't see or use very often because when they have to use it, there's so much spray that you can't race anyway. It displaces about 65 litres of water per second. The Inter does about 30 litres, and 65 litres about 14 gallons. So a lot of liquid being chucked in the air. No wonder they can't see anything. Now, if you do watch wet cars in the rain, you'll notice that, okay, yeah, they are fully enclosed wheels. They still produce spray. It's not like there's none at all. And that's because the tyres are only part responsible. Wet cars utilise underfloor aerodynamics to keep those cars stuck to the floor, just as F1 kind of always has done. I mean, having rake and all that was, you know, degree of underfloor aerodynamics there, but now it's like the main thing. These diffusers are generating so much of the total downforce. It's the fundamental way that these cars stay stuck to the ground. Without these aerodynamics, these cars would be super unpredictable, super tricky to drive. Everything you don't want from an F1 car, everything you don't want from a website. Well, thanks to today's video sponsor, Squarespace, you don't have to worry. I've been using Squarespace for years to host my online homes, actually. I've got tommocluskey.co.uk, which is my website, my portfolio. That's all my old design work from back in the day. Or tommosracinggoods.com. New design coming up soon. So one is a portfolio, one is an online store. There's so much functionality baked in to the back of Squarespace. Flexible templates as well. You don't need any coding knowledge. Trust me, just utilize what they have and you can make something really pretty really quickly. It's free to give it a go and all. It's only when you want to publish your finished website live to the world that you have to pay anything. And I'm sure you will. So when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off of your very first website or domain. Do you remember prior to these regs, we were being told how much dirty air is going to be reduced by ground effect? This new philosophy, well, not new philosophy, a philosophy we haven't seen in F1 since, the 80s. How following cars used to lose up to 46% of their downforce when following within 10 meters of a car ahead. Now that are reduced to like 18%. Great, happy days. And yes, of course, as time's gone on, we've seen teams pick holes in these regulations, find out little ways to generate more downforce, but then also create more dirty air. And that's a conversation for another video. The point is, the fundamental reason why the dirty air is being reduced so much with ground effect cars is how it deals with the air coming out the back of the car, the direction that air goes. Previous cars, dirty air goes straight into the back, and then the cars going behind, get out my face, dirty air, 46% downforce loss, right? Instead, these ground effect cars, they push the dirty air higher up into the air, out of the way of the driver, no dirty air, closer racing, lovely jubbly. Or at least that is lovely jubbly in the dryer. Unfortunately, when it's wet, well, the results are exactly the same, but instead of just on airflow, chucking airflow into the air, it's chucking water that has mass. We know how much these cars suck at the ground. Okay, we saw Carlos Sainz in Vegas find out just how much these cars suck, literally. Right, got a nasty surprise there. It's getting all that water on the ground, and again, when it's soaking wet, it's chucking up tons. There doesn't seem to be a solution that allows us to have it both ways. And of course, the regulations have to prioritize, well, what are the more likely conditions? And it is way more often dry than it is wet in Formula One. To quote George Russell, you don't get that many laps and that much experience in the wet. We probably do 95% of the season in the dry and only 5% in the wet when conditions are always variable. It might rain a little more or a little less while in the dry. Things remain pretty much the same. So you have to be on your toes and be very dynamic and adaptable in the rain. Look, let's be generous here, okay? Let's say George is maybe overextending a bit here. Let's say it rains 1 in 10% of the time. We get some moisture on track. Well, obviously, a lot of those times, it might just be a little bit of drizzle, right? It might be a little bit of moderate rain. It's not like every single time a drop touches the ground, it's blinding spray, okay? So of that 10% of the time, I would say probably less than half of that time is it like extreme heavy rain that justifies anything more than an intermediate, because intermediates displace about half the water of the wet. So if you can get away with an inter, you're displacing less water, you're chucking less water in the air, and you're going quicker, unless you're crashing, of course. And if it gets too wet, then of course that's where the problem comes from. These conditions are an infrequent occurrence, but when you've got 24 races in a calendar year, you're going to get 1 to 2 races a season. Who knows, with the way the climate's going, maybe it will be more going forward, right? You're going to get races affected by rain. Also, if we move to different locations, say we went back to Malaysia, for example, which I'd love to go back to Sepang, that place gets some serious rain. The consequences we saw of the rain, Spa 2021, of course, is the main one in recent years that comes to mind. The sport's going to do everything it can to stop something like that happening again. Offering half points after a few laps behind the safety car was a bit hollow. I think they could have communicated things to fans on the ground. Motorsport fans who actually go to races are hardcore. Don't mind sitting in the rain, right? But just tell people, okay? It's the same with the issues in Vegas, right? I think there's a communication problem more generally. And I don't think it was communicated very well in the broadcast to us watching either. But then you look at the thing that Liberty and F1 really care about, which is, in their pockets, right? The money. The amount of money, the millions, the tens, if not hundreds of millions that can be thrown at a race weekend, all told, right, by all teams, this travelling circus around the world. Fans flying from different countries to every single Grand Prix, right? It's not that you only get British fans at the British Grand Prix, right? You get people from all over the place will come to have that experience. You can't just push it back a week. And for a Formula One race to not be able to go ahead because of spray, especially spray that would not stop other categories racing, that is a terrible look. I remember watching Spa 21, even Japan 22, and that was crazy rain affected as well. And the drivers were saying, it's not the fact that they don't have the grip, it's the fact they can't see anything. The wet tyres in those heavy rain conditions do give grip. If you can't see, pointless. But look, back to wheel guards. We know they're not going to do anything to stop the underfloor spray. What we've got to hope is that they do enough to be like, okay, there's still spray, like you get in other you know, in any racing car or going around a wet track. But is it lesser to an extent where you're more likely to be able to go racing? Time will tell, right? They're doing these tests for a reason. Let's not lose our minds, all right? There's plenty of time for these to be kind of refined, I like to think. Although I'll tell you who I reckon looked at those solid sides with bright eyes. Zach Brown. He'll get a Google Chrome logo slapped straight on them as soon as possible. Although I will say I definitely prefer the version with the open spokes. I think if you're looking at the side profile of a car, you can see the tyres rotating, the Pirelli blue of the wet tyre. Gonna look at speed probably pretty similar, not gonna look that much different. If you have the covered ones, it'll look like a 1999 Honda Insight, which I don't think anyone wants that. But then again, if it's that or no racing at all, then give me the carbon cheese wheels any day of the week, I suppose. This is such an infrequent occurrence that do it. If it's that or nothing, then obviously give me that. If we get some banging wheel-to-wheel racing, the great equaliser, remember, in the rain, everyone's going to forget about that in a hurry. Although K-Mag's definitely going to rip one off and get a meatball flag, guaranteed. Lots of questions remain, you know, how these get removed in pit stops, how heavy are they going to be, how much they actually obviously reduce the spray, are there other prototype designs in the works? I think the open spoke ones are looking the most promising, but give me your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Maybe there is a perfect solution that I've not thought of, the FIA's not thought of, no one's thought of, but maybe you have. So let me know. Maybe we just put these new 2026 engines in a bunch of Formula Fords. No front, no rear wing, that solves the problem, right? No downforce, just vibes. My name's Tommo, thanks again, have a good one. Ta-da.